The latest whispers and intel out of fall camp. We need to start at Ole Miss. I got a call the other day from a very trusted source in the SEC. Here's what's happening right now. Obviously, fall camps are open. Obviously, there's position battles all over the place and coaches trying to acclimate. But here's what else is happening. There are NFL scouts just traipsing the country. Big Ten, SEC, all the major conferences. So if you go to these practices, you see some unfamiliar faces with familiar logos on their hat on the sideline. They are NFL scouts. Well, the good news is they start to talk a little bit. And I have it on very good authority that one of them, who has been through Oxford, Mississippi recently, backed up and validated everything we were hearing and saying about Zach Evans from the spring. Quote, Zach Evans is the best player on that team, unquote. And then they went on to just talk about how he could very well tear it up this fall. Here's the interesting aspect. Zach Evans is a 7-yard per carry guy. He's been that way his entire career. 2020, 7.7 yards per carry. 2021, right at 7 yards per carry. I have no reason to think that production is going to significantly drop off or those averages are going to significantly drop off in any way this year. And if you are not familiar with Zach Evans, he's a former 5-star tailback. He committed to TCU, played a couple of years there. He's at Ole Miss now. Think about Ole Miss. What's your opinion of Ole Miss? Ole Miss trying to replace Matt Corral at quarterback, obviously. And they've got Jackson Dart there, and they've got Luke Altmaier, not necessarily in that order. And I've told you that I actually lean under on the win total a little bit. If I had to pick an under in the West, I said it would be the Ole Miss at under 7.5 because of uncertainty at quarterback and me not knowing what level of play they're going to get there. But here's what worries me about my own prediction. Zach Evans worries me about my own prediction. I think he could end up statistically being the best running back in the SEC this year. And that's a loaded statement because it's a loaded year in the SEC at the tailback position. Jahmyr Gibbs, rightfully so, is going to come to Alabama. He's going to get a ton of push. I am telling you, especially because of the dynamic and maybe how much more they'll have to lean on the ground game at Ole Miss this year. Zach Evans, if you just promise me health, look at my fists clenched for Zach Evans. If you promise me health and nothing else, he's going to be a dynamite player. He's going to put up really big numbers. And a lot of what we were hearing from spring is starting to get backed up from NFL scouts that have come through Oxford. They were unequivocal in their praise of Zach Evans. They said he looks like a monster. He's the best player on that team. And they're talking about futuristic, NFL-type observations. Futuristic meaning down the road, not like they have a different lens to look through than you and I do. Next up, as we look at B-roll of Lane Kiffin. I just always like to pause so we can roll through the B-roll of Lane Kiffin. Next up, I want to go to Dallas. Fort Worth, actually. Excuse me. I want to go to Fort Worth. TCU's got a little quarterback situation. We don't believe in the word controversy when it comes to quarterbacks. The only quarterback controversy is if your quarterback's getting arrested. If there are just multiple guys battling for a job, there's another word for that. And Webster's calls it, where'd I put it? Oh, competition. Webster's calls it competition. And I, in addition to Webster's, don't think that's a bad thing. Well, at TCU, they've got one forming right now. Sonny Dykes is the new head coach there, by the way. Gary Patterson off to Austin, Texas. How weird would that have sounded a few years ago? But you're looking at a situation here that's probably evolving away from what your favorite preview magazine may have led you to believe. Your favorite preview magazine, and I'm going on feel now because I haven't looked at all of them, full disclosure with TCU, I think they may say that Max Duggan is going to be the starter at quarterback. And recently as this week actually, we've seen a little shift. So far, the way Sonny Dykes has handled the rotation there is he's let one guy run with the ones one day, another guy runs with the ones the next day, and it's kind of been ping-ponging back and forth until yesterday when Chandler Morris, the Oklahoma transfer, took reps with the ones for a second day in a row. Gasp all around the room. And it starts to feel a little bit like what I know some members of the TCU fan base have wanted to happen may be happening. Chandler Morris may be getting his shot. I mean, he's getting his shot. He may be taking advantage of his shot. And keep in mind, this is not new. He didn't just transfer in. Chandler Morris has played meaningful football for TCU already. And by meaningful, I mean, remember last year. Remember when Oklahoma went into Waco and they got upset by Baylor, and we were there. We were on the field for that one, and the field gets stormed. And remember how I told you Dave Aranda was kind of tranquil during the post game. and he was upset because they played at such a higher level than they had the week before. What was the week before? Here's what the week before was. It was them going to TCU and losing to TCU and losing to Chandler Morris and TCU because he hung 461 yards on them. Yeah, so he's played some meaningful football. Keep an eye on this. I'm going to talk about the Big 12 later in a different context. Keep an eye on the TCU quarterback battle, the quarterback competition. No controversy. Let's talk about Arkansas for a change on this show. Well, it's been minutes and minutes since we talked about Arkansas. You know, the transfer portal was very kind to Arkansas, and it wasn't by happenstance. They worked it that way. I was reading some of Trey Biddy's work. I try not to miss a word of what Trey writes over on Hogs 24/7, Hog Sports, excuse me. And he was talking about how the way Arkansas has worked the portal and then the way these guys are showing out in practice is starting to illustrate a change in the way the landscape of the sport works. And he's right about this. It's a really good way to put it. You're used to thinking about programs like Alabama. They don't rebuild, they reload. You've heard that a million times. And you're used to thinking that about Ohio State. And like when LSU's very good, you'll think that about LSU. A&M will start saying that about themselves. But history has taught you second-tier programs like Arkansas or like Michigan State or the like, they don't get to do that, right? They have to recruit from a couple of years out, and then they aim for a year, and then they hope, boom, everything pops that year, but then they've got to rebuild a little bit and build their way back up to another couple of years down the road. And it's what you would call a developmental program. At its best, that's what Arkansas in the past would hope to be. Well, as Trey Biddy wrote, and as we are currently observing at Arkansas throughout fall camp, that may be changing a little bit because of the portal and because of how attractive Arkansas as a program is and how it's become a destination, which is something I've told you a million times over what the casuals would call the offseason. Well, here's where rubber meets road. Trey Biddy's talking about having been at Arkansas for 19 years and having been around practice. I would encourage you to go read some of his work over there today and yesterday because he said, I've been out here 19 years. I've never seen a more well put together Arkansas football team. I've never seen one with so few relative glaring weaknesses. It's not a perfect team. Bama's not a perfect team. Nobody's a perfect team. But he's talking about how guys like Jaden Hazelwood at wide receiver or guys like Drew Sanders at linebacker, running with the ones today, by the way, for the first time. Guys like Latavius Brinney, who I think will eventually take over at a one safety spot. Dwight McLaughlin, probably a starting corner that they got from LSU. These are not baptism by fire, true freshmen, throw them to the wolves type situations. These are guys who have played winning football and meaningful football elsewhere in the SEC and beyond, and now they're Razorbacks. And what practice is validating is what that coaching staff already suspected. And that is these are equal to or better than the options we already had here, or in some cases, especially on the defensive line, you're flipping through your preview magazine and all those preview magazines are just talking about what Arkansas lost. And Barry Odom's up there as the defensive coordinator saying, well, it's true that we have new names here. We're not really sacrificing much in terms of potential production. And I think when you watch Arkansas this year, you'll see that. Doesn't mean they're going to win every game, but you will not see this massive drop-off. In fact, you may even see a net increase in overall productivity in the power rating world, how you would look at Arkansas. So, I mean, it's not a surprise that those guys are good. It's just a validation of what we thought about them in spring. Let's talk about Miami. Hadn't gotten a lot out of Coral Gables yet. That changed today. Miami had a practice that was open, I think, for the most part, to the media. And so, obviously, talked to a few people about Miami practice. Here's two pieces of good news about the Canes program right now. The first, and the one I want to really emphasize, is defensively, I don't think they're surprised that they have some good players. I think they're pleasantly surprised maybe at how far along they are. You know, I think probably they suspected it would take a little bit longer for elements of their defensive front to coalesce. I think that maybe they're probably a little bit ahead of the curve relative to where they thought they'd be in run D, but that's not really where I'm going to emphasize things. What I want to talk about is how good they could potentially be on third down, and I think that coaching staff's really realizing this right now. And it gives two elements that I always look for with a new coaching staff. You come in, you largely inherit what you inherit. That's what Mario Cristobal and his staff have done. They've got what they've got, and you focus on recruiting, to rectify any holes you may see for the future. But as for this year, you got what you got. Well, that varies greatly case by case. And in the Miami case, here's what we could have. We could have one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the conference in Tyler Van Dyke, probably a deeper stable of receivers given his ability to get the ball to them than is expected nationally, and the ability to cause havoc on third downs defensively. Their pass rush package is going to be really, really good. Now, whether they can earn the right to rush the passer, totally different story. I don't think run defense is going to be a massive weakness for them, but that's a remains to be seen. I will grant you that. That's fair to say. But if their run defense is B or better, they possess the ability to, I think, get after the quarterback on third down and cause havoc plays, cause turnover plays, cause negative plays, and they possess the ability to quick strike score offensively, especially at the quarterback position, given what they have, to win more games than you think they're going to win, I guess is the dumbest and best way to say it. Miami could be better because of those two things, and that's something that staff inherited that is a huge blessing for any new coaching staff. So I think they like where they're at right now. Most people say that through 1 week of camp. Let's just keep an eye on it. Lastly, I wanted to go to Oregon. They've had a bunch of injuries along the offensive line. Good news is, at least according to reports, none of them appear to be season-ending. The bad news is it's a new staff. Therefore, it's a new offense. You got a new quarterback there. You're trying to install a bunch of stuff, and I don't think I need to tell anyone watching this show, missing most of your starting offensive line is not a recipe for a lot of success early on when you're trying to build chemistry, you're trying to build rhythm, you're trying to build everything that you need to have a competent offense. Dan Lanning apparently will not tell you who the starting quarterback is going to be there, so I'll spoil it for you. Bo Nix is going to start at quarterback for Oregon. Apologies to the staff out there. This is not much of a mystery. Having said that, they open with a bang. They play Georgia, and they are about a 17 or a 17.5 point dog. And if we, for the minute, are to assume they lose that game, just for argument's purposes, then they're going to fall off the national radar for probably a week, but then they've got Brigham Young at home. My point there is this is not a Michigan schedule where you get 4 relative layups and you can say to yourself, we don't have to have everything figured out by week 1. We can get 3 or 4 weeks into the season before it really, really gets tough. That's not Oregon. It's tough right off the bat for Oregon. So this offensive line situation bears watching. They got a good team. This is a team that is capable of winning the Pac-12. But they can't win the Pac-12 if we don't get this injury situation rectified. It's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's just injuries happen. This is why even this time of year, there's not a whole lot of skill in forecasting this stuff because you don't know who is and isn't going to be available. That's the conclusion of Camp Whispers and Intel. That segment will just get fatter and fatter and fatter as the next couple of weeks go on.